Hello everyone, this is Archana Priyadashini, Assistant Professor in the Department of Information Science, Canberra Engineering College. Let's talk about part 3 of Module 4. How do we implement file systems? So let's talk about the file system structure at the beginning, wherein we are seeing the layered file system and some kind of organization units like file organization module, a logical file system, and also about the implementation. So after the implementation of the files, we're seeing how do we implement directories and different kinds of partition and mounting mechanisms, followed by the different allocation methods we are using to organize data. So and here we are dealing with the contiguous linked and other kinds, linked and index kind of allocation schemes in the allocation methods. And finally we are seeing about the space management, wherein we are seeing different approaches, how to improve the efficiency, how to improve the performance, and some information regarding the recovery in this chapter. So to talk about the main objectives of this module is, first of all, is to describe the details of implementing local file system and directory structures. Okay, that is the basic thing. And also to implement, how do we implement this in a remote file system, so that is also part of the discussion. And to discuss the different allocation methods, the different kinds of allocation methods, and the free block, how what about the efficiency and performance of such kind of systems. So first, about the file system structure. As you know, what exactly is a file structure? So as you know, the file system resides permanently on second storage device, and it is used to hold lots of important information. Okay, and these information must be stored permanently. That's why we are having the file system which resides permanently in the secondary storage. Okay, and this file system is mounted and maintained by the secondary storage. What are the characteristics of the disk? That is, same place may be used for reading, writing, and modification, and user can access the disk directly for any block of information, and this block may be used for data transfer. So each block in the disk, it contains several sectors, and the IO transfer between the memory and disk is performed on a block. So there is a particular default size, sector size, that which is 512 bytes. This concept of file system is used for efficient and convenient access to the disk. So we have got another unit called as the file control block. So we'll discuss about file control block. What exactly is the file control block? So this block contains information about the file, which includes ownership, permissions, and location of the file contents. So this FCB or file control block contains the information about the file, along with the what are the ownerships of the file, and other possible information related to file, that is location of the file contents. And there is also device driver. Okay, device driver which controls the physical device. And this file system is organized into several layers. So we'll see the layers of file system in the next slide. So this is a particular representation of the file system. First, we have got the application programs. layer, or it is also called as the application program layer. Then we have got a certain set of logical file system. Okay, in this logical file system, this actually maintains the metadata information. As you know, metadata includes all the file system structure, including yeah, it includes all the file system structure, excluding the actual data. So this logical file system manages the directory structure to provide file organization module. And you know what is there in file organization module? So this module knows about the files and the logical blocks as well as physical blocks. So by knowing the type of file allocation used and the location of the file, the file organization module can transfer or translate the logical block addresses to physical block addresses for the basic file transfer. So each file's logical blocks will be numbered from 0 through n, whereas physical blocks containing the data usually do not match the logical numbers. So therefore, a translation is needed to locate each block. So as I've told you, this particular module, file organization module, it knows about the files and their logical blocks as well as the physical blocks. And next about the basic file system. So this needs only to issue generic commands to the appropriate device driver. So this is served to produce or to give necessary commands to the appropriate device driver to read and write the physical blocks on the disk. So each physical block will be identified by the numeric disk address. For example, drive 1, cylinder 73, track 2, sector 10, like that. So for each physical block, it will have a particular disk address. This address may be in terms of the location. Drive 1, cylinder 73, track 2, sector 10, like that. And we have got the IO control, which consists of device drivers at the lowest level and interrupt handlers to transfer the information between the main memory and the disk system. Okay, so this IO control consists of device drivers and interrupt handlers in order to transfer the information between the main memory and the disk system. So device driver can be thought of as a translator. So its input consists of high level commands and its output consists of low level hardware specific instructions, so which are used by the hardware controller. So these are the possible. This is the layered file system, and many of them, most of the operating systems support more than one file system. For example, most CD-ROMs are written in High Sierra format, which is the standard format agreed upon by CD-ROM manufacturers. So without such standards, there will be little interoperability between the systems. So file system itself again is composed of many different levels, as you can see here. And next, these are the layers which are there in the file system, and it is described briefly over here, which I have already mentioned. The first is device driver, which manage IO device at the IO control. Next is basic file system, which gives command like a higher level command to translate to the device driver. So it consists of there is an this is just like a commands which gives commands to the device driver to read and write physical blocks. And next we have got file organization module, which understands file logical address and physical address. So this is like you can see here, there's an object table which is having the object ID, disk offset and checksum. Okay, disk offset and checksum, and this will be linked to the directory. So using disk offset and checksum, you get the directory entry, and this directory entry contains just the file name and the metadata. Again, this file metadata is being linked, or we get what is that called as a key and a value. So and this metadata is nothing but it contains the file extents, that is the disk offset and checksum, and what are the possible values for that. So let's say this is, we have got a directory called as directory slash home slash q. Let's say this is the directory, and we have got so many files and corresponding bytes for each of the files, and that each file has got a particular inode. Each file has got a particular inode 123 here. So this will be indexed to a particular which will have a particular information, that is what are the permissions for that file. For example, for foo, foo, it is indicated by inode 123, and what are the possible data information about the file, that is the permissions, and who is the owner for that file, what to which group id that file belongs to, and what are the file under which directory is it, and what is the data block, what's the sector number. All information of this file will be contained in this inode, and this inode again points to different blocks. So that's it, like you have seen these kind of information in your systems. So there is this is about the hardware, and you can see the types of hardware, which may be DVD or CD or a hard disk, or it may be a disk drive. So it lists, your system will list all the properties of the hardware. So as to which number, okay, which number bus, what is the target, and what is the value of LUN. So all the information pertaining to that particular drive is being listed here. You must have seen this snapshot. So many file systems sometimes may have maybe within an operating system, like each of which will have its own format of CD-ROM, but it should follow a standard format so as to serve the interoperability. So layering is useful for reducing the complexity and redundancy, but it will add the overhead and can decrease the performance. So these are the different kinds of blocks, like a boot control block and the partition control block. Okay, so we have system calls which are implemented at the API level, but how do we implement these functions? So there are several on disk and in memory structures that are used to implement such a file system, and these are going to vary depending upon the operating system and the file system. So on disk, the file system will contain information about how to boot an operating system. Okay, so in this kind of on disk will contain many information about how to boot an operating system, and what are the total number of blocks, and what is the number and location of the free blocks, and directory structure, and what are those individual files. So all this information will be there in the on this structure. Okay, and these on disk structures, they include specific blocks like this: the boot control block and volume control block. So what is boot control block? This contains information needed by the system to boot an operating system from that partition. So what information are required in order to boot the operating system from that partition. This is given here in boot control block. And if the disk does not contain any operating system, this block can be empty. It is typically the first block of the partition. So in UFS, so this is the boot block. In NTFS, it is a partition block. We call this varies depending upon the system. So in UFS, it will be called as a boot block, and in NTFS, it will be called as a partition block or partition boot sector. So what is this partition boot sector? So this contains partition details like the number of blocks in the partition, what are the size of the blocks, okay, and free block count and free block pointers and free FCB count, and what are the FCB pointers, okay. So in UFS, so this is called as a super block, and in NTFS, it is called as a master file table, okay. So in UFS, it is called as a super block. Here that's why we are listing here them as volume control block. In NTFS, it is called as a master file table, okay, master file table. So as I've told you, in on disk structure, it contains both boot control block and partition control block. Okay, boot control block contains the information to boot an operating system from that partition. So in case if it does not contain an operating system, this block will be empty. And in case of partition control block, it contains partition details like how many blocks in the partition, size of the block, what is the free block count, and so on. So as I've mentioned that it consists of FCB count. So what is this FCB? So FCB contains many of the files details, including file permissions, so ownership, size, and location of that data block. And in UFS, this is called as the inode. Okay. In NTFS, this this information is usually stored within the master file table. So we have talked about the port file control block, which contains all these details like inode number, permissions, size, date, and so on. So what does a typical FCB contains? That I mentioned, it contains these information. It's very important. Any file control block or FCB contains all these file details like what are the permission set for a file, and what is the file date, what is the time in which the file is created, or who has created that file, that's called as a file owner, and to which group that the file owner belongs to, and what are the access control list for that file, and what is the desired file size, and about the pointers to those file data blocks. So we have seen about on-disk and in-memory structures which are used to implement a file system. And depending upon the on-disk or in-memory, the structures vary. So for on-disk, we have got boot control block and partition control block. Wherein in the on-disk, we are dealing with just the file system which contains the information about the booting. So in order to boot, we need boot control block and partition control block, and its necessary information. Likewise, in in-memory partition table, so this in-memory information, it is used for both file system management and also for performance improvement, and this is done with the help of caching. So we have got certain features which refers to opening a file and refers to reading a file, and plus the data buffers which hold those data blocks from secondary storage. And there are several structures related to this in-memory partition table, so which contains information. First of all, it contains information about each mounted partition, and in-memory directory structure holds the directory information of directory. So there are structures which are there in in-memory information or in-memory file systems, which are in-memory partition table, in-memory directory structure which holds about the directory, and system-wide open file table, and also per process open file table. So let's see them. Here we have got the in-memory file system structures both for file open and file read. Okay. um, so as I mentioned, these are the file open and file read kind of structures. And whenever file open is invoked, or whenever the file is set to open, so it will locate the particular file. Okay, it will locate a particular file. And file, first of all, actually a file has been created, it can be used for IO. First, though, it must be opened. The open call will causes, or it will pass a file name to the file system. And when a file is opened, the directory structure is searched for the given file name, because the directory structure contains a directory entry for the file name, and parts of the directory structure are usually cached in the memory to speed the directory operations. So it will, once a file is found, the FCB will be copied into the system-wide open file table. So what is there in system-wide open file table? It contains a copy of the FCB of each open file as well as other information. Okay, so system-wide open file table contains the copy of FCB of each open file. Whereas now, after the file is found, the FCB will be copied into the system-wide open file table. And this table not only stores the FCB but also has entries for the count of how many processes that have the file being opened. So next, an entry is made in the per process open file table. So once a file is found, an entry is made in the per process open file table. You can refer there. So what does this per process open file table contain? It contains a pointer to the appropriate entry in the system wide open file table. So what was there in system wide open file table? It contains a copy of the FCB of each open file. Okay, and and this per process file table, it's like a pointer to the system wide open file table. It contains other information too. So once an entry is made in the per process open file table with a pointer to the entry in the system wide open file table, and these other fields can include a pointer to the current location in the file, as well as there will be an access mode in which the file is open. The open call can return a pointer to the appropriate entry in the per process file table, and all the operations are then performed with this pointer. So you can refer them. There is an index, and there is a based on the index, it will search the per process open file table, which points to the system wide open file table, and which system wide open file table contains information about the FCB along with the other data blocks. So this happens during file read. So when a process, as long as the file is not closed, all the operations will be done on the open file table. And whenever a process closes the file, the per process table entry is removed and the system wide entries open count is also decremented. Next, about the partitions and mounting. So as you know, the layout of the disk has got many partitions, and a disk may be sliced into multiple partitions, or a partition can span multiple blocks. Okay, so this is also possible, uh, and the each partition can be either raw, containing no file system, or it may be cooked, which contains a file system. So when we say a raw file system, okay, it refers to what? When we say raw file system, it refers to that there is no file system which is appropriate. Okay, and the Unix swap space can use a raw partition as it uses its own format on disk. So there is another partition. There is also another kind of partition called as a hooked partition, wherein it contains information about or it contains the file system. Raw disk contains no file system, whereas hooked file system contains a file system. Hooked disk contains a file system, and some database use raw disk and format the data to suit their needs. Raw disk can also hold information needed by discrete systems, like bitmaps also can be stored. And raw disk contains a miniature database holding the RAID information. So boot information can also be stored in a separate partition. And root, there is also a root partition which contains the operating system kernel and other system files which is mounted at the boot time. Let's see about this virtual file system. And in this virtual file system, it is a second layer. Okay, it serves two important functions. That is, it separates the file system generic operations from the implementation by defining a VFS interface. There is a VFS interface. Okay, and this it separates the file system generic operations from the implementation. So that's why we have got an interface called as VFS interface, and there will be several implementations for this VFS interface. And this VFS is based on file representation structure, and we call it as a vnode, which contains the numerical designator for the unique file. Okay, and uh, next, as you know, this network-wide uniqueness is required for support of network file system. So VFS distinguishes local files from remote ones, and local files are further distinguished according to their file system types. So what does this VFS do is it activates file system specific operations to handle local requests according to the file system types. So it will handle the request according to the file type. So that is the beauty of VFS. So whatever may be the type of the file, so based on the type of the file system, so it will handle the appropriate request, and even calls the NFS protocol for any remote kind of request. So file handles are constructed from relevant vnodes and are passed as arguments to the procedures. So this is done entirely by the VFS. Okay, so this, as you know, the first layer in the file system interface is based on open read, write, and close calls, and all Linux has got four object types. That is inode, file, superblock, and dentry. So these are the four object types that the Linux can provide. Okay, and you can see the schematic view of the virtual file system, how exactly it is. So there is a file system interface. Okay, the file system interface is nothing but it is done through a VFS interface, and this VFS is based on the file system structure called as vnode. So it's like a designator for network wide Unix file. So and VFS interface is connected to all the local file systems. So it determines what kind of file system each is providing, and based on that it will provide the services. That is VFS interface. So next, about the directory implementation. So here we have got linear list and hash table. So these are the two implementations of directory. what is linear list? This is the most simplest method of implementing a directory which is used to, or it is to use a linear list of names with the pointers to the data blocks. Okay, the simplest method of implementing a directory is to use a linear list of file names with pointers to the data blocks. So linear list of directory entries requires the linear search to find a particular entry, and this method is simple to program because we can directly search and the entry is in order, maybe in increasing order. Okay, and to create a file we must first search the directory to be sure that there will be no existing file which has the same file name, and then we are going to add this new entry at the end of the directory. So to delete a file we search the directory for the name file and then release the space allocator to it. In order to reuse the directory entry we have to do several things. That is, we have to mark the entry as unused, okay, or maybe with the used saying the unused bit in each entry, and then we can attach it to a list of free directory entries. The third alternative that can be done is to copy the last entry in the directory to the freed location and to decrease the length of the directory. So we can also use the linked list. Linked list can also be used to decrease the time to delete a file. So a real advantage of linear list of directory entries is the linear search to find a file. And directory information will be used frequently and the users would notice a slow implementation of access to it. The next information or the next kind of implementation is supported is hash table. So in this kind of data structure, we are using a linear list which stores directory entries but has a hash data structure. Okay, together with the linear list we have also got a hash data structure, and this hash table takes the value computed from the file name and returns the pointer to the file name in the linear list. Okay? And therefore it can greatly decrease the directory search time. So what it does is it takes a value from the file name and returns a pointer to the file name in the linear list. So search time is less and insertion and deletions are also straightforward. And there must be some provision in order to avoid collisions in case if there are two file names hashing to the same location. So what are the drawbacks of the hash table is that they are generally fixed size and there is a dependency of the hash function on that size. Let's see some of the possible allocation methods. So we have got different kinds of allocation methods because we have to have the direct access nature of disk allows the flexibility, and in most of the case many files are stored on the same disk. The major problem is how to allocate the space to the file so that this space will be utilized efficiently. We are using three methods: contiguous, linked, and index. The first method is contiguous allocation, wherein it requires each file to occupy a set of contiguous blocks on the disk. And the disk addresses define a linear ordering on the disk. So we'll be having disk addresses and those will be in a linear order. So what happens with this ordering is we can assume that only one job is accessing a disk. So for example, accessing block B plus 1 after block B normally requires no head movement. So that is the thing that we can assume. And when head movement is needed, it is only one track. So thus the number of disk seeks required for accessing the contiguous files are minimal. So all these contiguous allocation of the file is defined by certain disk addresses, okay, and also the length. There will be disk addresses and length of the first block. Say if the file is in n blocks long, and it starts at location B. So then it will occupy B, B plus 1, B plus 2 and so on plus B plus n minus 1 spaces. So the directory entry for each file will indicate the address of the starting block and the length of the area allocated for this file. So you can see this kind of allocation of disk space, and you can see the direct file name, the start and the length. So here you can find out that the count value is has got length 2. It will start from 0. It has got length 2. It follows the linear order, that is uh, 0 1. Okay, length 2. Next, tr has got it starts at 14. You can observe from 14 it is the shaded region. From 14 3 spaces length is given to be 3 spaces. So 14 15 16 is being occupied like that. If you try to find for the space allocated for mail and list and def, so it follows the same order from 28 29 30 31 in span of length of 4, and f also follows from 6 length of 2 6 and 7. So for direct access to the block which starts at block B, we may immediately access B plus I. So both the sequential and direct access can be supported by contiguous allocations. So one drawback of contiguous allocation is to find space for a new file. So in contiguous allocation problem can be seen to be a particular application of dynamic storage allocation problem. So first fit and best fit that we have seen, they are the common strategies in order to select a free hole from the list of available holes, and all these algorithms will suffer from external fragmentation. Next is about the extent based system. So what is this extent based system? So some operating systems use a modified contiguous allocation scheme in which the contiguous chunk of space is allocated initially, and then when that amount is not large enough, another chunk of contiguous space, which is called as an extent, is added to the initial one. Okay, so this extent is a contiguous block of disks and which are allocated for the file allocation. As and when the file contains one or more pieces of information, you are going to add the next block of information contiguously. So thereby we have got extents. Okay, so in contiguous file allocation we can say that it supports variable size proportion, and it is easy to retrieve a single block, and accessing a file is also easy in case of contiguous allocation and provides good performance, but it suffers from external fragmentation and pre-allocation is required. So but in linked allocation, the next kind of allocation, this is also called as a chained allocation. So each file will be having a linked list of blocks and file ends at a nil pointer. So this operating system keeps a ordered list of free blocks. Okay, and there will be a file descriptor, and this will store or will contain the pointers to the first block, and each block stores the pointer to the next block, like that. Okay, so there will be contiguous link between the blocks, and usually the disk blocks may be scattered anywhere. So directory contains a pointer to the first and the last blocks of the file. So uh, there will be no compaction and external fragmentation, but the major problem here is that the files are accessed only sequentially. However, we have the advantage that there is no external fragmentation and pre-allocation is not required. But the drawbacks are it has to be accessed sequentially, and space will be required for the pointers, and it cannot support direct access. And to talk about the file allocation table or FAT, it is an extension of linked allocation method, and here instead of putting the pointers in the file, we keep a table of pointers, and this pointer table can be quickly searched to find a particular block in that file. So what are the basic characteristics of this kind of linked allocation is that however linked allocation solves all the problems of contiguous allocation. However, we know to create a file it is also easy. To read a file also is straightforward. There will be no external fragmentation with linked allocation. To write a file, system finds a free block and this new block is returned to and linked to the end of the file. While creating the file, it is not necessary to declare the size of the file. A file can contiguous grow as long as free blocks are available. So you can see this kind of linked allocation uh, method, but here there are drawbacks. That is, space is required to store all these pointers, and it cannot support direct access, and files can be accessed only sequentially. You can observe the start of the file is said to be 9, and there are pointers from 9 to 13 and 16, then 1, 6 to 25. So 25 represents the end of the file, represented by -1 in the uh, entry or in the disk. So this is the representation of the file allocation table. As you can see that there is a particular name of the file or directory entry for the file. Okay, this file allocation table or this table has got directory entry which contains the block number of the first block of the file. So first block of the file has got number 217, and the table entry index for that block number then contains the block number of the next block, like 217 points to the next block. So 217 entry contains 618, which represents the pointer to the next block. So 618 once again contains the pointer to the next block, like 339, like that. Okay. So this chain will continue until the last block, which has got special end of the file value as a table entry. So all those unused blocks are indicated by 0 table value. Allocating a new block is simple, and replacing the previous end of the file value with the address of the new block. So 0 will be replaced with the end of the file value. The next kind of allocation method is the index method. So what is this index allocation? So here, as we know, linked allocation, it solves the external fragmentation and size declaration problems. However, in the absence of FAT, linked allocation cannot support direct access, that we know, right? But in index allocation, this problem is solved. How? By bringing all the pointers together into one location, that is called as the index block. So there will be an index block which contains all the pointers together in one particular location, and each file will have its own index block, which is an array of disk block addresses. For example, the ith entry in the index block points to the ith block of the file, and directory contains the address of the index block. So you can see that picture. To read the ith block, we use the pointer to the ith index block entry, right? And whenever the file is created, all the pointers in the index blocks are set to nil. So this kind of index allocation will have, or it supports direct access without suffering from external fragmentation, and but it does suffer from wasted space. See, the pointer overhead of the index block is generally greater than pointer overhead of linked allocation, because you have to store so many pointers together in one location. There is a overhead. So this is an example of index allocation. So you can observe that there is an index file here, and there is an index block, especially 19. In this, 19 refers to all the pointers like 1, 6, 10, 9, 15. Okay. not 15, 1 6 1 1, then 10, then 9, then we have got 25, then we have got 16. Okay, see, from 19 it moves to 15 and 10, so final value is 10. So this 10 will be stored in this index block. Similarly, 19 moves directly to 9, so 9 is used as an index block. Okay, and from 19 it moves directly to 1. You can observe 1 is there in the 1 is used as, 1 is represented as a pointer in the index block. So this index block 19 is contains all these pointers. So it supports direct access. So from this point we can directly access one location, and it does not suffer from wasted space. So this index, as you know here, the OS keeps a list of free blocks, and it allocates the array to all the pointers to all the blocks used by the file. So each file will contain its own index block, and it contains an array of this setter of addresses. So you can say the basic advantage is that there is no external fragmentation and is faster than two methods and supports sequential and direct access. But the drawbacks are there is a pointer overhead, and index allocation does suffer from wasted space. What things are required in this index allocation is it needs a index table, it needs random access, and dynamic access also is possible without external fragmentation, but it has overhead of storing those index block which contains all the space for all the pointers, and mapping also can be from logical to physical in a file of maximum size of 256 bytes, and there is a block size of 512 bytes, but we need only one block for the index table. So this is the how the mapping goes on in index allocation. Okay, so there's a two level index of 4K blocks could store 1024 byte pointers or 512 into 512. You can observe this, which is divided into two level indexes Q1 and R1. Q1 is an index for displacement into the outer index, and R1 is used as follows: from R1 of 512 bytes again split up into Q2 and R2, which is displacement into block of index table and displacement into block of the file. So here there will be an index from the outer index to the index table. As you know, as you've seen the pointers, the index table contains the pointers. From the index table, it will refer to the particular file. From the directory entry has got the index, okay, index block, and that index block it's like an outer index. This outer index contains a table of only pointers, and this pointer will point to the actual data which is stored in the file. So talking about the performance of different kinds of allocation methods, this contiguous allocation scheme, it is good or great for sequential and random access, and linked allocation is good for sequential but not for random access. And declare access type at creation time, select either. Not to declare access at the creation, you have to select either contiguous or linked allocation. And index is more complex. Here the single block access would require two index blocks, which then reads data block that is read. So we have seen the index block, right? And if the index block is too small, it would not be able to hold enough pointers, let's say for large file. If you have got large file and it would not The index block was so small, it would not encompass all the pointers for that large file. So we need some mechanism to handle this issue. First is the link scheme. Second is we have got multi-level index, and third about the combined scheme. So in the linked scheme, the index block is normally one disk block. Okay, and it can be read and written directly by itself. To allow for large files, we may link together several index blocks. Okay, so for example, index block might contain small header giving the name of the file and the set of first 100 disk block address. So the next address is nil, or it's a pointer to another index block. So that is about the link scheme. In case of multi-level index, okay, this is a variant of linked representation, and it is used and it is to use a first level index block to point to a set of second level index block, so which in turn points to the file blocks. So to access the block, the operating system uses the first level index to find the second level index blocks, and that block is to use to find the desired data block. So there will be a first level index block and which points to the second level index blocks, which in turn point to the file blocks, that is in multi-level index. And the third scheme, like that we can have the space required for a larger file to store the pointers. And the last scheme, that is the combined scheme. This alternative is used to keep the first, let's say 15 pointers of the index file in the file's inode. So we are storing 15 pointers of the index block in the file's inode. The first 12 of these pointers will point to the direct blocks, that is, they contain the address of the block which contain the data of the file. Thus the data will be thus the data for small files do not need a separate index file, right? But if the block size is 4 KB, then up to 48 KB of data may be accessed directly, that is half of it. Okay, 48 KB of it data may be accessed directly, and the next three pointers will point to the indirect block. So we are using schemes like direct blocks which contains the address of the block that contain data, and indirect blocks wherein if it is large size, the block size is large, we are using three pointers which point to the indirect blocks, wherein the first indirect block is the address of the single indirect block. Single indirect block is an index block. Okay, and then there will be a double indirect block which contains the address of the block that contains the address of the block which contains pointers to the actual data block. The last pointer would contain the address of the triple indirect block. So what is this triple indirect block is? There will be number of blocks which can be allocated to the file and which exceeds the amount of space addressed by these pointers. So all the extra information will be stored in this triple indirect block. So there will be direct block which contains address of the block which contain data. There will be a pointer called as indirect block. Here we have got three pointers: single indirect block, double indirect block, and triple indirect block. Okay, so in this double indirect block contains address of the contains pointers to the it contains address of the block which contains pointers to the actual data. Like there will be a pointer to data, and the triple indirect block will contain the number of blocks wherein the file exceeds the space. So single indirect block, it is an index block containing not the data but the address of the block. So in the single indirect block you have got the address of the block which contain no data, and in double indirect block contains the address of the block, okay, as in a single indirect, but that address of the block contains address of the block again which contains the pointers to the data block. Okay, it's like address of the block to data block. So that is there in double indirect block. And in the last triple indirect block you have got the space to store the number of blocks wherein the file exceeds the space. So next about free space management. So what is this free space management? So since the disk space is limited, we need to reuse the space from the deleted files for the new files, right? So to keep track of the free disk space, the system is going to maintain a free space list. So there is a free space list to keep track of the free blocks. And this free space list records all the free disk blocks that are not allocated to some file or directory. So to create a file, we search the free space list to find out the amount of space and allocate the space for the new file. And this space is then removed from the free space list. When the file is deleted, its disk space is added to the free space list. So let's see the concept, that is, it makes use of bit vector, linked list, grouping and counting mechanisms to represent the free space management. The first thing is about the bit vector. So in this, you can find the free space is implemented as a bit map. That is, each block on the disk is represented by a bit. Okay? And it uses a vector chain of blocks. So how do we represent these blocks are, there will be chain of the blocks from 0 to n minus 1, and we are using bit 0 to represent the free block, and we represent 1 to free blocks are represented by 0 and use blocks are represented by 1. So some representations are like this, and some of them represent in this manner, when they say that each block will be represented by 1 bit. Okay, and if the block is free, the bit is 1, and if the block is allocated, the bit is 0. This representation vary from system to system. So how do we calculate the block number calculation? That is, block number will be actually block size by disk size, or it is calculated as uh, number of bits per word into number of zero value word. That is, how many blocks have been occupied into how many bits are there in each word plus the offset of the first one bit. So that is how the block number is calculated, and CPU will have several instructions to return the offset within the word of the first one bit. So this given the block size and disk size, we can easily calculate the block number n, and which is nothing but block size by disk size, which is block size is 4 KB or 212 bytes by disk size, that is 2 raised to 40, so which is around 2 raised to 28 bits or 256 MB. So if there are clusters of 4 blocks, it represents 64 MB of memory. And this kind of bit vector or bit table is it has got the advantages that it is easy to find a free block and is small as possible. But the drawback is that it may not be feasible to keep the bitmap in memory for larger disks. Now, here you can see the idea about linked list, as you know what it is. But since the disk space is very limited, we need to make use of the space very efficiently so that we can store the files. And to keep track of all the free disk blocks, we have got what is called as a free space list, which I have listed, which I have shown you in the last class, right? And this free space list records all the free disk blocks which are not allocated to some file. So we have seen about the bit vector, and with the help of bitmap, how it is possible to have this free space allocation. So in case of a bit vector, each block is represented by 1 bit, and if the block is free, we say that we allocate the bit value as 1, and if this block is allocated, the bit is set to 0. So we have seen sequences of zeros and ones, and where particular blocks are designed to be free and the rest of the blocks are allocated. So for all those free blocks, we are going to set them as 1, and rest of the blocks are set to 0. So main advantage of that bit vector or bitmap is that it is very simple, okay, and efficiency. There is a lot of efficiency in handling the free disk or free block or set of consecutive free blocks. But we'll move to the next criteria, that is a linked list, or what is called as a we are mainly considering the free list in case of a linked list. Just observe the diagram here. What you have got is a sequence of numbers which are linked, in the disk space. This lists a sequence of free space, from 2 to 3. Then we have got 3 to 4, then 5, 8, 9, 10. You can see the allocation, how it happens. But here in the case of a linked list, we cannot get contiguous space that easily enough. And there is a lot, instead of bit vector, in the bit vector there will be a sequence of consecutive free blocks, but that is not possible in case of a linked list. We cannot get contiguous space that easily, and there is no wastage of space. And there is also no need to traverse the entire list if the free blocks are recorded. So in this approach, the what do we do is the free space management. What it does is to link together all the free disk blocks in this manner as seen here in the figure. So there is a pointer from the first block, which has a special location in the disk, and it has a cache location in the memory also. So this first block contains a pointer to the next free block, and so on. So you can see that there's a pointer from 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, so on. There's a contiguous there's not it's not possible to have contiguous, but they can be random, but it is linked in some fashion. In that way, we can say that the three blocks together can be bunched as a group. So here block 2 would contain a pointer to block 3, again block 3 would contain a pointer to block 4, 5, 8, and 9. But traversing the free list is not that easier enough, and usually the operating system simply needs a free block so that it can allocate that block to the file. So next technique that is used here is grouping. So what exactly is this grouping? So this is a modification of free list approach, and here we store the addresses of the n free blocks in the first free block. So all the addresses of n free blocks will be stored in the first free block. Okay, and the first n minus 1 of these blocks are actually free. The last block would contain the addresses of another n free blocks, and so on. It goes like this. This is a modification of the linked list, and it stores the addresses of the next n minus 1 free blocks in the first free block. And there is also a pointer to the next block, which contains the free block pointers. The next concept is counting. So totally we have got how many approaches? We have got 4 approaches. One is bitmap or bit vector. Next is linked list. The third technique is grouping, and the fourth one is counting. So here let's discuss about space maps. So this is basically used in all ZFS kind of systems, and considers metadata input output on very large file systems. There are full data structures like bitmaps which cannot fit into memory because of thousands of input IOs, and this divides the space map. It divides the device space into metaslab units and manages metaslabs. So given volume can contain hundreds of metaslabs. and each meta slab has associated space map. So it uses a particular counting algorithm, but there are records to the log file rather than to the entire file system. So there will be log of all the block activity and in time order plus the counting format. And this meta slab activity, it loads the space map into the memory in the balanced tree structure. Okay, so next to discuss about the efficiency and performance. The efficiency is clearly dependent on the disk allocation and directory algorithms, and there are certain types of data which can be kept in the files directory entry. This pre-allocation is done as needed or as per the metadata structures, and it is a fixed size, or they may be varying size data structures. So the efficiency. So to discuss about the efficiency, clearly the efficient use of disk space is heavily dependent on the disk allocation and what are the algorithm used. Right. For example, Unix inodes are pre-allocated on a partition. So even an empty disk will have percentage of its space lost to the inodes. So the types of data normally kept in the files directory entry also require consideration. Commonly, the last write date is recorded to supply the information to the user and determine whether the file needs to be backed up. So, in the systems, we have got last access date. So, apart from this disk allocation and the directory algorithms, there are certain types of data. As I meant, it is kept in the files directory entry. So, this is a most important consideration. Okay, some systems also keep the last access date so that user can determine when the file was last read. So the result of keeping this information is that whenever the file is read, a field in the directory structure must be returned to. So this change requires the block to be read into memory, a section change, and the block written back out to the disk. So because operations on the disk occur only in the block chunks, so anytime a file is open for writing, its directory entry must be read and written as well. Okay, so we are seeing the concept of pre-allocation or as needed allocation of metadata structures. So one of the difficulties in choosing a pointer, there is a pointer right for each direct. So one of the difficulties in choosing the pointer size or indeed any fixed allocation size is planning for the effects of changing technology. So many data structures are of fixed length allocated at the system startup, and these structures include the process table and open file table. So when the process table becomes full, no more processes could be created. When the file table becomes full, no more files could be opened. Then the system would fail to provide services to the users. So these are the main points which affect the efficiency of the system. That is disk allocation and directory algorithms, types of data kept in the files directory entry, pre-allocation, and fixed size of or varying size data structures. Now to discuss more about the performance, we can still improve the performance of this file system algorithms in many ways. That is by keeping the data and metadata close to each other and having a buffer cache. Okay, so in this most of the Unix systems they have what is called as a unified buffer cache, which separates the section of main memory for frequently used blocks. One approach is to use memory mapping, and the second is to use the standard system calls read and write. So without unified buffer cache, we have situations similar to the one which I'll show you with the help of figure that tells you the input output without unified buffer cache. And in that instance, the read and write system calls will go to the buffer cache, and the memory mapping call requires using two caches, the page cache and buffer cache. Okay, this is called as a double caching. That is, here memory mapping proceeds by reading in the disk blocks from the file system and storing them in the buffer cache. But it wastes significant CPU and IO cycles due to extra data movement within the system memory. There is also another concept called as synchronous synchronous writes. Okay, these synchronous writes occur in the order in which the disk subsystem receives them, and writes are not buffered. Thus, the calling routine must wait for the data to reach the disk drive before it can proceed. Asynchronous writes, these writes are more common and bufferable, and they are faster. So what happens in asynchronous writes is the data is stored in the cache and it returns control to the caller, and metadata writes among others, which can be synchronous. So operating system frequently use a flag in the open system call to allow a process to request that writes be performed synchronously. For example, a database all use these features for atomic transactions. And there is another idea, that is free behind and read ahead. What is free behind? A file being read or written sequentially should not have its pages replaced in LRU order, because the most recently used page will be used last. Instead, sequential access may be optimized by techniques known as free behind and read ahead. So free behind removes a page from the buffer as soon as the next page is requested. The previous pages are not likely to be used in and waste the buffer space. So with the read ahead, the requested page and several subsequent pages are read and cached. So these pages are likely to be requested after the current page is processed. So retrieving the data from the disk in one transfer and caching it saves a lot amount of time. Next is about the page cache. So what is this page cache? This is also another technique that improves the performance. So some systems maintain a separate section of memory for disk cache, wherein the blocks are kept under the assumption that they will be used again shortly. So other systems cache file data using a page cache. So page cache caches pages rather than disk blocks using the virtual memory techniques. So this page cache will use virtual memory techniques to cache the file data, and caching the file data uses virtual addresses, and that is known as unified virtual memory, wherein several system uses page caching to cache both process pages and file data. So this is called as unified virtual memory. And Solaris kind of systems uses a block cache and a page cache. The block cache is used for file system data, metadata, and page cache is used for all file system data. So you can see this input output without a unified buffer cache, which I mentioned what exactly is a unified buffer cache. So there is a memory mapping system or IO which proceeds by reading in the disk blocks from the file system and storing them in the buffer cache. What happens is this one approach is, let's say we have got opening and accessing of the file. One approach is to use memory mapping, and the second approach is to use read calls and write calls, because read is for can be used for opening and accessing the file, which is write. So without a unified buffer cache, how it would be look like this? So without a unified buffer cache, for example, we have the read and write system calls which go through the buffer cache. The memory mapping call requires using two caches, right? One is page cache and buffer cache. So what it does is memory mapping proceeds by reading in the disk blocks from the file system, okay, reads from the file system and stores them in the buffer cache. And virtual memory system cannot interface with the buffer cache. So here the contents of the file in the buffer cache must be copied to the page cache. So this is called double caching, which requires wastage of CPU and IO cycles, and there's an because of the extra data movement within the system memory. So here, let's say about unified buffer cache. When if we use unified buffer cache, the problem of double caching is avoided, right? With the help of unified buffer cache. In the previous slide, you have seen about without having a unified buffer cache, there is a problem double caching, and it wastes the CPU and IO cycles by doing extra data movement within the system memory. So, and there are also inconsistency in the two cache copies, which results in corrupt files. So this kind of unified buffer cache solution, it uses the same page cache to cache both the memory map pages and the ordinary file system input output, thus avoiding double caching. So it uses same page cache to cache both the memory mapped pages. But if which cache get the priority and what replacement algorithm to use. So by providing this unified buffer cache, we'll see the diagram next. So here we are using a unified buffer cache wherein the memory mapped IO and read and write system calls both are mapped to the same page cache. So what does page cache consists is all file system data. And in the previous slide you have thought about what algorithms would be used. So this kind of unified buffer cache avoids the two extra data movement within the system memory because both the memory mapping and read and write system calls uses the same page cache, which has the benefit of avoiding double caching and allows the virtual memory system to manage the file system data. So regardless of whether we are caching the disk blocks or pages, LRU is the most reasonable general purpose algorithm for block or page replacements. There are also certain systems like Solaris which implement priority paging, in which page scanner gives the priority to the process pages over the page cache. So they have these page caches and the file system and the disk drivers, they have some kind of interaction. That is, when the data is to be written to the disk file, the pages are buffered in the cache and the disk driver sorts the output queue according to the disk address. So these two actions allow the disk driver to minimize the disk head 6 and to write the data at times optimized for disk rotation. So there will be because we are using synchronous writes, and unless synchronous writes are required, a process writing to the disk simply writes to the cache, and the system asynchronously writes the data to the disk when convenient. Now let's see about recovery of the file systems. Since the files and directories are kept both in the main memory and on the disk, so sufficient care must be taken to ensure that system failure does not result in loss of data. So that is called as a consistency checking. This is very important. So as we have seen how the directory information is kept in the memory to speed up the access, the directory information in the main memory is generally more up to date, right, than the corresponding information on the disk, because it is the one that is executing in its current execution. And the write of the cache directory information to the disk does not occur as soon as the update takes place, right? It takes some time to write the particular data updated data onto the disk. And let's say there is a possibility of computer crash, and in this case what happens to the table of open files? So this table of open files will be generally lost, and with it any changes in the directories of open files, right? So this event can leave the file system in an inconsistent state. What will be the actual state of some files? That will not be again restored. But how to restore it? A special program will be run at the reboot time to check for and correct the disk inconsistency. With the help of consistency checker, this compares the data in the directory structure with the disk blocks on the disk with the data blocks on the disk, and it tries to fix the inconsistencies. So these allocation and free space management algorithms, it tells you what types of problems the checker can find and how successful it will be in fixing them. For example, if you are using a linked allocation and there is a link from any block to its next block, then the entire file can be reconstructed from the data blocks and the directory structure can be recreated. Okay, so next let's see about backup and restore. So because magnetic disks they fail, care must be taken to ensure that data is not lost forever, and the system programs can be used to back up the data from the disk to another storage device like maybe floppy disk or magnetic tape and so on. Okay, and recovery from the loss of an individual file, which will be a matter of restoring the data from the backup, that helps us to identify that there has to be a backup. So because the managed disks they fail, care must be taken to backup and restore, and to minimize the copying that is needed, we can use the information from each file's directory entry. For example, if you know that the backup program last backup of the file was done and file's last write date in the directory, this indicates that the file has not changed since that date, and then the file does not need to be copied again. So we can have a backup schedule like this, like day one we can say a copy to a backup medium of all the files from the disk, which is called as a full backup. We are backing all the files from the disk. This is called full backup, that can be scheduled as in one particular day, and the next day we can have a copy to another medium wherein only the files which are changed since day one can be backed up, which is called as incremental backup. Day 3, we can have a copy to another medium from all the files which are changed since day 2. Like that, for day n, we can say that copy to another medium for all files changed since n minus 1 the day. So then go back to day 1 itself. So this new cycle can have its backup written over the previous set. So in this manner, we can store or restore an entire disk by starting the restores with a full backup and continuing through each of the incremental backups. So of course, larger the n, the more tapes or disks need to be read for a complete restore. The added advantage is that we can restore any file accidentally deleted during the cycle by retrieving the deleted file from the backup of the previous day. So this is all about recovery. We have seen about the backup and restore plus the consistency checking. How the consistency checker does the data by comparing the data in the directory structure and the data blocks on the disk and trying to fix these inconsistencies.